Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you're well fed and ready to jump into the second part of our day. I am fortunate to be able to introduce you to our first speaker this afternoon, to this session that's going to open up and include dialogue and facilitating, and there's going to be a film that premieres. So you are in the session for the 1:30 slot. So I'd like to introduce Cristina Mormorruni, co-founder and director with Indigenous-led. So without further ado, have the stage.
Thanks, everybody. I'm not a lover of mics, so just yell at me if I start to step away from it. It always feels like a snake in my face. Thank you all for being here. It's a real pleasure. And as Adam said, we're going to pack a lot in, but anybody that knows me knows that I don't just do one thing at once. So I think we're going to try and pull off 3 or 4 things. I also want to just acknowledge that Irvin Carlson, the co-founder, and I'm actually now calling him co-director. He hasn't really stepped into that role yet, but there you go, of Indigenous-led is here. Some of you got to meet Irvin yesterday, but he has been... I don't know, we've done it all together, and I'm always so grateful for him and so grateful for him to be here and answer questions and be a part of this conversation. And then Gavin Noyes is here as well. Gavin has been part of our team coming on a year, and he heads up a brand new body of work for us called Art, Advocacy, and Healing. We still are a conservation organization, but realize that actually what we're being called to do is heal ourselves, help heal each other, our communities, this beautiful planet that we all get the privilege of living with. So I'm just going to dive right in. What I'd love for this session and I'm going to talk real fast. I actually grew up in California, but I can talk like a New Yorker from time to time. So I'm going to pull out my New Yorker, my indigenous New Yorker. It's an odd mix. And I'm going to just run through this real quick. But the reason I want to share this is that Indigenous-led really was founded on this premise of we need to do conservation differently. We need to look to the past in this present moment of calamity and figure out what we do together. And so we're an experiment. We're a baby. We're just 2+ years old. We're still figuring stuff out. One of our core principles is that we co-create, and we want all of you to be a part of who we become. And so I want to just kind of key up a little bit of a conversation around what we are doing, who we are, what we think Indigenous conservation looks like, what relational conservation looks like. And then I'll just end with some questions, some riddles. I love riddles. I've always loved riddles. And so I'll just end with some riddles that hopefully will just key us up as a collective, as a group, to talk about how do we do this? What does it look like? What lessons do we need to take on board? How can we change how we work and move and live in the world? So that's kind of the flow, if you will. We always start with a prayer. We always start with a prayer so that we're all one heart and one mind. I happen to be a bit of a closet poet, so this is a poem prayer in motion. It was something that we did with a poet named Jimmy Santiago Baca during COVID. And we had about 150, 200 people on Zoom back when all of us could actually tolerate it. And we shared poetry, and it was centered in our relative buffalo. So I'm just going to use that as our prayer to start off.
I've been buffaloed, banged out, hit up, left to die on concrete plains. A 15-year-old calf herded into a cage with other strays twice my age. Shoulder to shoulder, tattooed rage, then released, almost deceased to find my way back to where my people's bones lie broken and buried or bleached by blinding sunlight.
We have to fight for the right to basically protect these animals and use these animals and live off of these animals in the same way that we did in many, many years past.
Hooves heave earth, beat out ancient rhythms. Hide flinches, ears flick, horns toss, tails lift. We race on broad, worn backs from a profane past into the unknown future, slicing through the impossibility of the present.
We met eye to eye as if to say, You finally made it all the way out here, huh? All the way to stand in front of something you'll never know. To face the storm in front of you instead of sheltering. To survive in spite of everything that wants you extinct.
Bringing home and rewilding buffalo in a way that's not linear or has like a square structure. It's really a circular, dynamic structure way of, an indigenous way of thinking about it.
Furry, bulky bodies avalanche. Hooves thunder, rubble and pavement, cracked streets, toppling street lights, hemorrhaging traffic, exits jammed, martial law declared. Armored military goon squads and Bradley tanks roam the night with orders to kill the 4-foot creature. But the buffalo are coming.
Sacred ground where we can bear the storms of winter and words designed to divide and not be divided. We stand together, facing the winds of change, wild and uncontained, outcast from ancient herds circling the center pole again. We are the thunder of baseline and rhyme beneath steel-toed feet and blood-stained streets, the rumble of a new day following the old ways home.
I've seen that so many times, and I always wonder why I show it, because all I want to do is curl up in a ball and cry. So we stand together. And, you know, I'm talking about buffalo. I am absolutely buffalo obsessed. Beaver, I will be honest, in front of all you beaver lovers, is a second love. But their stories are so similar, right? Their stories are so similar. It's hard to imagine what 30 million, 60 million, 90 million buffalo looked like, sounded like, smelled like, felt like. What did 400 million beaver look like, smell like? What did they make us feel? How different was this land? And it's extraordinary to think that we humans, who I like to think are so lovely and so creative, can do this in less than 100 years. And so it's a number, I use it all the time because it's just so mind-boggling that I think it's good to be mind-boggled. In that boggle, do we come up with new solutions? Do we dig deep and realize, wow, we really got some work to do to stand together? In less than 100 years, 30, 60, 90 million beings, and I use that word very consciously, relatives, were decimated. And we know why. And so it's not surprising that if buffalo is our origin story, is our guide, at Indigenous-led, these are our values. These are the values that we use internally, externally, every day. We reflect on them, we work on them, we talk about them all the time. The value that I don't put in there, when I turned 50, I got bold enough to say it. The reason I do this work is love. And those values are just a way to manifest it. So really what we're learning as a little organization is, yes, we're about all these things, but we're about love. And we're about fierce love, because we're a bunch of mamas. Irvin keeps us in line. The greatest compliment I got from Irvin was that I was the lead cow. So I just wanted to give you a flavor of how we talk about our vision and mission. We're very proud that we are an organization that was founded by Indigenous people for Indigenous people, to work with Indigenous people, to build voice and power so that we can really turn things around. We really fundamentally believe that the ways that Indigenous people know and live and are with the earth is what all of us hold in our hearts and what we all need to remember how to do together. And we're constantly playing with our strategy, because I'm vaguely a strategy geek. But right now, what we think about is sort of these three bodies of work. How do we rematriate and restore our relatives and their homelands? We have a big focus, obviously, on buffalo, a growing focus on beaver, bear, and Bigfoot. And I'm not kidding. We also need to make the case, right? People they might support Indigenous-led, but they don't really recognize that what that support actually means is that you need to turn Western conservation, Western science on its head and think about it differently. It's not just including Indigenous people at the table or even having them at the head of the table. You got to flip that table upside down and start over, or remember how we did it in the past and filter it through this reality that we're living through that none of us understand. I don't know about you. I don't understand what's going on in the world. And then how do we reconnect to place, to culture, to ceremony? How do we use art and story to reconnect us and remind us? So that's kind of our shtick, if you will. I'm also very big on why, as my poor staff needs to wrestle with. Why are you doing that? And so what? So this is just a graphic that we use to kind of talk about our why and our what and our how. And I think the important thing is to recognize that we think in circles, we think in spirals. At the very center of that always is the sacredness of relationship and partnership. And these are our tools. Many of you, no doubt, who do campaigning, who do organizing, use these tools. You probably use them in this very same order. It's a common language that we share. How do we continue to build those connections? And very quickly, I just want to take you to Blackfoot territory. This is, again, our origin story, is what we come out of, what we're informed by. But it's also a very cool way to share with you that while I do relational conservation every day, I don't really know how to put it into words. I don't really know how to make you feel it and believe it and want to do it. I don't know how to make you fall in love with a different way of doing things that maybe is outside your comfort zone, outside your box, maybe outside of what you're fluent in. So here's a little slideshow of the work in Blackfeet. Yeah, hopefully you can smell it too. I'm always like, how do I bring smell in? So let me know if I succeeded. So that slide of the lake, that's Waterton Lake, up on the other side of the Medicine Line. And I have been told that that's where the beaver bundle emerged from. So that was my nod to our relative beaver. Even though I say I can't put things into words, I am obsessed with words as a writer. And early days, I was trying to figure out, how do I talk about the difference between relational conservation, indigenous conservation, and Western conservation? And I went down a bit of a dark road. So this is a slide that's basically trying to make that case of how different it is. There's, of course, many points of synergy, but how odd is it that we talk about maximum sustainable yield and allowable cut harvest rates for our relatives? It's pretty weird. What about this idea of taking only what you need and asking before you take? What if biodiversity isn't really what we're about? It's really about restoring relationships with our relatives. What if it's not a resource? What if it's a relative, an ally, an alliance? It just changes the conversation, and I think that's all I'm suggesting with this slide. How do we lean in and change the conversation? How do we create space for things that we haven't even dreamed up yet with this beautiful, radical imaginary that we carry around in our big old hearts? And so I'm just going to leave you with, I'm not going anywhere, unless you want me to, with some of the riddles. Because it's easy to put a slide together with a bunch of words and be vaguely poetic and evoke feelings. But then we got to switch into our big old brains, and we got to touch it down, and we got to make it real, because we have to change things. So how do we do that? And so these questions, and there's a million others, and I actually really hope that folks throw up some questions for us to ponder as a group. Something I think about a lot, Janella Larson, somebody I had the privilege of meeting recently from up north, she said to me, you know, Cristina, it's not a biodiversity crisis, it's not a climate crisis, it's a relationship crisis. A relationship that has been broken with ourselves, with each other, with our communities, and with the planet. So if we're really about healing a relationship, how do we do that? You wouldn't go to maximum sustainable yield, would you? This is also a huge paradigm shift. How do we lovingly create these proof points, these stories, these ways in which we expand our brains? I'm one of these weird people that loves it when somebody offers an idea and I'm like, holy Moses, I never thought of that. That is so cool. How do we do that for each other? That's where cool things come from. That's where greatness comes from. Power. I really have avoided power my whole life. It feels like a dirty word. But I've realized I live in Western society, and I'm not going to change anything unless I have power. How about that for a riddle? Somebody who hates power, having to step into power, having to be up here. I would like to be in the back with you. Dancing. By the way, that was beautiful. Thank you. How do we embrace power? What does that look like? How do we redefine power? How do we create a world where power isn't even a conversation? How do we as Indigenous people step into our authority and our agency, our power? Personal, community, nation. One thing that I've really been pondering is it's all fine and good to look out there and tell everybody what to do and what they need to change, but it has to start in here. I carry tremendous trauma. I'm broken in a million ways, but I'm going to heal the world. I got to do my work. We all got to do our work. And wow, what if we can do it together? So what's that relationship between personal transformation and social transformation? And then I love this. This is stolen from Robin Wall Kimmerer. What if grief? What if pain? What if sorrow? What if our trauma is actually a door that we can step through, fly through? I have an obsession with wings. What if it's a door we fly through, and it's a door in which we commit ourselves to love, fierce love, and that pathway that love offers to healing and justice? So I just throw that up there. Our beautiful partners from the Beaver Institute will close with, we do actually have a beaver movie, which is pretty cool. But yeah, let's just open it up, and I'd love to invite my fabulous cohorts up here to help facilitate conversations, you two as well. We do everything as a collective, so, and then I get to step in the background. It's actually very strategic. So thank you all very much for listening. Questions, comments for the others? Just kidding. What questions are we missing on this last slide?
Feel free to just say it. You know, don't need to raise your hand. Just.
So I completely resonate with what you're asking.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I really resonate with what you're asking, and I agree. And I think that process of agreeing began through reading Braiding Sweetgrass. And I'm kind of like, oh, we need the skills of the sociologists and the artists and the relationship repair people. But I am a trained Western scientist. And so I think that's my question is, do I abandon my training and learn to facilitate relationship? Because my goal is shared. I want to steward this place. That is why I became a scientist, was because I loved stewardship. And I thought that was how. So that's kind of where I'm at in this soup of like, what do I do with this skill and this training when I want to be a sister steward? And we need social change.
This is such a great question. Be your beautiful sister scientist self. That's what we need. Because it's going to take all of us with all our different skills. I'm not a scientist. I like to pretend I am, but I'm not. I'm an artist. That's what I do. I can understand science because I've spent a lot of time around people who are willing to bear with an artist who's like, wait, what? Why? Data? Blah, boring. Right? No, love data. Data's cool. It's riddles, Cristina. Oh, okay, got it. So absolutely, it's going to take all of us. You guys want to... And we got geniuses over here.
I wasn't planning to come up here, but that's such a resonant question, and I think all of us, we all come from such different backgrounds, and one thing that I've learned is if we're trying to defend something, we all want to be homogenous so that we know where we're coming from and we trust each other and we stand as a wall to protect the thing that needs protection. But if we're going to build something, we have to bring every one of those skills and backgrounds and understand each other's roles and the ways that we each can put those unique puzzle pieces in place. And I think that really stepping in and really ignoring some of your scientist colleagues who say you can't do that because it's art or it's beauty or it's emotional, that's just ridiculous. And we all need to understand the things that we're most passionate about. If we can bring our heart to our work, you're worth 10 times as much as if you try to keep that behind you.
You know, just listen to everything in our movies and about healing. One of the things about Indigenous-led is one of the big things is healing also. And even with our own people at home, you know, there's a lot of healing that needs to be done, even among our own people, even with each other. But there's also a lot of healing with everybody else. We have to live with the traumas that have been done to us. And it's talked about love. You know, I guess we need to learn how to love, to heal and to love, even though there's been a lot of trauma in our history. And even both ways. I mean, even, you know, other people. And then And I think it takes everybody together to realize that, to come together to heal and talk about those things and bring them out, and not have them back here, but bring them out and be able to bring them out. And then you go forward and learn to love one another. And I think that's a lot about what Indigenous-led is about. To me, a lot of our trauma is what happened to us of being told, this is the way it should be. And that's why, to me, how Indigenous-led is formed, that we are telling our story, we're leading the way, and not somebody else telling us, this is the way you have to do it, which is our history. But there's a lot of healing, and there's still a lot of healing that goes not only out there, but even with our own people at home for one another.
Hi. My question has to do with the fourth bullet, the what does power, authority, agency have to do with conservation? And the organization that I work for, we work a lot on the Wind River Reservation. And because of that, often federal agencies and state agencies come to us and said, well, how do we have Native voices come to the table? How do we invite them so they don't feel like they're just being asked because it's a Native voice? And so I guess I would love some ideas about how do we bridge that gap and that connection, because I know there's a lot of mistrust and disagreements, but I really would love to know, when I'm asked that question, how do I answer it? So.
Just as I talked a little bit about what I just now, there's a lot of mistrust. There is, because of all of our history. And even myself, I've got to really know somebody before I can even trust them and work with them. In my lifetime, I know, and I've done, a lot of different things within my life. Served on our tribal council, and you got to work with, I guess, the federal government. But to us, there's a lot of mistrust there, because a lot of the things that were done to us. Even to this day, talking about bringing our voice to the table, there's always a law that there's consultation. They say we're going to have consultation, but is it truly consultation, like you're talking about? Well, we'll bring them to the table and we'll say a few words, and then we'll go out and say, well, we fulfilled our trust responsibility. We had consultation with them. But actually it's not. It's still just them telling us what they want to do. So there's a lot of that we need to teach for them to get beyond that, for us to come to the table. I've learned all of that, and I'll never be brought to the table as a token Indian. I know I've learned that, and I've sit and I listen a whole lot before I even talk. And there's a lot of healing, I guess, goes along with that too, to be able to come to the table and actually, for that side, to really hear our story, and really listen, really listen to our story, and not just say, well, come to the table, well, we heard you, okay, and we go on. But that trust, there's still a lot of mistrust there, and there's still a lot of healing needs to go on for that.
Hi, my name is Bob Boucher. I'm with the Superior Bar Conservancy, and we're from the woods of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and we're Beaverland is where we're from. And I'm very much in love with the plains and buffalo land too, but in terms of, let's say, conservation organizations partnering with Indigenous-led and other Native groups, what do you feel is the best way for us to enter into relationship and to pull this wagon or the sled or our path to heal this? What is obviously there's an honesty of relationship and bringing science to give data to speak to the advantages of biodiversity, that this is us that we're talking about. But I think at times we don't necessarily know how to work together to pull and push through those doors together, unified, in a unified way. So any advice is how the collective energy and effort and heart that's here can work best together?
That's a great question. I actually think all three of us are going to answer it. Just FYI. It's a great question. And there's part of my brain that I think a lot of what Irvin said really gets at it. And I know for many of us, it's also an unsatisfactory answer because it takes time. It takes a lot of time. But I was kind of whipped into shape by a colleague I was working on a project with back, I don't know, years ago. And he said to me, you know, Cristina, you keep talking about traveling at the speed of trust and blah, blah, blah. He did literally say blah, blah, blah. And I said, I know, I got a lot of blah, blah, blah. And then he said to me, how fast did you fall in love with your husband? How long did that take? And I just laughed, because my husband and I met each other and bought a bed the next day. So, it takes time, and magic happens. You know, we're not all going to get in bed together, just FYI. I am not suggesting that. But it can happen. It can happen very quickly. And I think part of it is where that personal transformation comes in. Can you show up as you are? Not as your title or your organization or fill in the blank. Who are you? Can you come to the table as you in your most beautiful, vulnerable self? And I have seen incredible things happen. You know, we do need to create space. We need to treat space as a sacred thing. But you create space, and then you have some crazy woman hold it for you. And amazing things happen. I mean, we were getting ready for Buffalo release. I'll just very quickly share this because it truly is one of the most incredible highlights of my work in the world. And it's very small, but we were getting ready for the Buffalo release in July. And I'm holding space for Glacier National Park, Waterton Lakes National Park, Blackfeet, Buffalo Program, Fish and Wildlife, Indigenous-led. I'm forgetting somebody, but sorry. Holding space, and we're talking it through. We're working on logistics and fencing and timing and et cetera, et cetera. Council. One of our council members, Blackfeet Tribal Business Council member, was there. And Dave Romer, who's the superintendent of Glacier National Park, says, I have a question for you, Lyle Rutherford. And great, ask the question. And Dave says, do you want me to show up in my uniform? And I'm thinking, what? And then I went, oh my God. And Lyle said, yes, I want you to show up in your uniforms because I want people to see what we've created here in terms of relationship. Irvin's been at that for a really long time, but I've only been there for 8 years. Holding that space. I'm done, right? I can retire. Like, right? So it can happen.
You know, yeah, Christina's right. I've been at it a long time, but I was pretty young when I started. You know, I'm also the president of an organization called the Intertribal Buffalo Council. And that organization has been in place since 1992. And I've been the president of that organization. The organization is like 32 years old. And I've been the president of it over, I mean, maybe about 25 years. And dealt with a lot of people, a lot of organizations, the federal government, and seen a lot of a lot of people And things have changed ever since that I've started within there, just as Cristina talks about Glacier National Park. I remember when I was on a tribal council and we were arguing with them about the boundary, and there's a big history on that of where they were only supposed to have that side for 100 years, 100-year lease, but then all of a sudden it's theirs after that 100 years. And we had a meeting and they were talking about cattle getting on there and they thought we was going to fall for that, and they said we should put a fence up. And I said, we're not putting up a fence up. And then you'll call that the boundary and saying that's your side and this is our side. I'm not letting that happen. So those are things that we went through, but now Dave Romer, the guy before him, Jeff Mao, that relationship has really changed. We're working together, trying to put animals out there, be on the park side and also on our land, and it's a vast area, 44,000 acres right now, but we were hoping for, just on our land and back into the park side, which is actually our land too. Anyway, so things have changed, and even though we've come a ways, there is a ways to go. But to do that work and to work together, and just about talking about coming with your uniform or whatever, but I think you have to come to the table and you have to have it here to work together. You have to truly believe in making that healing, making up for those wrongdoings, and really wanting to truly work together. And like I said, and I always talked about when even with my own people, if we can do something, do it from here, or don't do it at all. So there's a long ways, there's, we've of working together, and there's still that mistrust that I talk about, in certain people, and I always pride myself of being able to read people and know when you're coming from here, and I always pride myself in that. So that's the biggest thing, I think, is just really truly wanting to do that and come to the table and really work together and then working from here.
I'm not Indigenous, just so you all know. No, I've had I was born and raised in Utah, and I've always actually felt like an outsider in places, and it's been hard. I've been through a lot of just situations where I didn't fit in, and people told me that I wasn't an okay person because I didn't fit. We would become friends, and then I would get dumped as a friend because I didn't have the right religion. I couldn't go over to a friend's house because their parents wouldn't let me or whatever. I think what we're dealing with in our country is layers and layers and layers of everybody trying to build a society together, and we all have different experiences, and it doesn't matter quite so much how you look, but let's try to understand each other. The Wind River Reservation has a lot of challenges, and so I've been thinking about how do we design a youth program and bring people to Salt Lake City, which is a much safer environment than Blanding or Roosevelt or Cedar City or Wendover. Let's bring Native youth to a safe space and invite safe people to not say anything, but just to be there. And let's go up City Creek Canyon, and let's go to a beaver dam, and let's pick berries, and let's make sure that we have the elders there teaching those cultural things. And let's be clear as non-Indigenous leaders and employees working for our organizations, what can we do as individuals? What can we do as organizations? And let's just wait and listen to what's actually needed, because it's probably not what you think. And some of these youth are going to be having real struggles, right? And some of those struggles might be easy to handle from Salt Lake City, or from that different perspective. And if you can step in, and maybe it's a private thing, maybe it's I don't know what it's going to be, but the problem is that we've never shown up and listened and been present and understood that this key to building relationships with the world, it actually has to start with each other, because we're the ones hurting each other. And if we keep hurting each other, a lot of the wounds that we're inflicting are totally unintentional, from power down to people without power. And so if we can understand that we're all in this together, we're all about building relationships, and we all understand that we have roles to play in building human relationships with anyone that needs it, let's do that and build some tight circles. Know that you can't have 1 million friends. You're just there to create your own little community. And if we each do that, then maybe not so many people fall through the cracks.
Good words. Talking about relationships, he's a good man. He's got a good heart, and that's why we're working with him. But we were at lunch, and Gavin talked about how he was really appreciative working with Indigenous-led, and Cristina was bragging on him how good he is. And I said, yeah, he's all right.
I think we have time for one more question.
It's almost as good as lead cow.
Well, this is on a similar line. It's not really a question. It's something that we've been grappling with. I work for a Native American tribe, but I am not tribal. And our little restoration shop is a mix, of tribal and non-tribal. And we've been grappling with an idea of like a boundary spanner, and maybe a boundary spanner from, kind of both sides, so that we can, really learn how to communicate and work together as a team. And we haven't quite figured that out yet, but whether that comes from sort of inside the team or looking to tribal leaders and elders from outside, and maybe some other, folks that are, kind of skilled in building these relationships, because we do all are having to walk in these two worlds, and I'm really trying to groom up tribal members to take my spot so that they can actually lead, but they're still going to have to walk in those different worlds. And so it's just, if you guys have any ideas about boundary spanners and that concept.
I love that question. And I think it is the question in a lot of ways, because we do need to work together, and we need to figure out how to understand each other, and whether that's native, non-native, male, female, scientist, artist. I mean, we just are a very polarized and polarizing culture and society right now. And so what are the ways in which we can come together? I will share that, when Irvin and I co-founded Indigenous-led, I got a little bit of rage in this body. And I was like, that's actually why Indigenous-led is all caps. It would have been red and like 150 font if I could have gotten away with it. And I get really PO'd when people put it in lowercase, just FYI. I don't care about grammar. And when we co-founded the organization, we had a long conversation about, are we going to be all native? Are we going to be native and non-native? And I will be honest, I personally have gotten a lot of critique for the fact that we are an organization that has non-native staff. And I was really personally wrestling with it, and I always pay attention to the wisdom that I'm sent. And I was driving down the road, and a podcast came on, and it was Melissa K. Nelson, and she just launched into Anishinaabe prophecy. And the prophecy is the seventh fire prophecy, which essentially says We're at a fork in the road. One fork, I want to say the right fork, I'm showing my politics, is torched earth. It's black. And there is no future. And the other fork is green and verdant. And I know I'm simplifying this tremendously, but essentially the prophecy is such that to get on that green and verdant path, we all have to come together. Newcomers and those that have been here since time immemorial. And so I think there really is some, that's very easy to say in a prophecy. It's really hard to do. We're really lucky as a team. Like, we haven't even had to have that conversation. But we will as we grow. And so I really appreciate that question, Sarah, because Irvin knows I'm a little too love and light all the time, and it's all going to be good, and glass is half full, and there's a case of your favorite drink on the way. But this is hard stuff, and it's also healing. So I would put it back on you. Tell us what to do and teach us. Like, let's share these stories of how we do this, because this is the real work. If we can't work together, our mama's going to be real PO'd. So, do you guys want to add to that at all? We have.
You know, just as we have on our logo, it's in talking about having non-native, you know, having his tribe work with us, you know, so Gavin. Anyway, it's about healing. It is. It's about healing. I mean, if we're gonna heal ourselves, I know we have to have others to heal along with us, to make things happen and actually work together. For us, you know, the things that we do, and have the people out there heal and believe in what we're doing, and helping us along the way. So it has to be together, and it has to be about healing and forgiveness. And it goes along with the healing.
Gavin forgives you. All right. I'm just going to say one more thing very, very quickly before I hand it over. Oh, I have 5 minutes. No, I don't. Ooh. So there was a bunch of you beautiful humans that were in the room with us yesterday talking about the possibility of an intertribal beaver council something. And I just want to let everybody know we have chatted with Adam about how we maintain the momentum around interest with that. So we'll follow up pretty quickly. Obviously, the most immediate thing will be just to set up some sort of connection between all of each other and maybe some conversations, but really open to any ideas. I know I shared my card with a bunch of folks, but really quite happy to have co-facilitation, co-leadership, or leadership. We don't need to own that at all. So just want to let everybody know that we're thinking about it and open to ideas, and I'm going to hand it over to these lovely two. Oh, you have one.
Yeah, I don't know if we still have time to show the film, but the last session of the day in here is one that I'm moderating, so we'll take time out of that and make more time for us because we can. Yeah, we're going to show this film that we co-created between our organizations, and just to give a response and sort of a reflection of some of the words and thoughts that are being shared up here. You know, the crisis that we're in requires bridge building and bridging between hemispheres in our brains, between ourselves, between the bodies of water we carry within ourselves. And as a non-Indigenous organization, we are led by the planet, by the eco model of beaver and the wetlands that they create in every animal and every species that lives within that space, and that's how we hold that space as an organization. So that's the theme in which we collaborate. And how do you do that as an organization that is maybe data-driven or Western science-driven? A bridge to that is hiring artists. Bringing artists into your field to help bridge those hemispheres, to help bridge those relationships. Because it can seem, the healing is so magnified, and it's so large, and it's so overwhelming at times. But by being quiet with yourself and finding those artists in your community, I don't have a degree in biology. I have a degree in playwriting. My background was in experimental theater, and yet here I am. This conference was organized not by anyone who'd organized a science conference before, but someone who'd worked on the Telluride Film Festival. This is how we do it. It's by bringing people who aren't in the conversation and trusting them, and trusting that they have a place. And that was the spirit in which the collaboration of this film occurred. And Avery can come up here as a team member who collaborated with Stephanie Baron and Chantal Ragoun at Indigenous-led. It was 50-50. It was held completely between us, and with a lot of questions, with a lot of joy, with a lot of laughter. And that was the spirit. And yeah, Avery, I wonder if you have any words to add to this.
Well, you said it so beautifully. I don't want to take away from what's already been said. I think I'll just echo sentiments, and just really excited to share this journey with everyone else, because it's been beyond rewarding from where I'm sitting. So, yeah.
I've said plenty.
All right. So this is a film premiere. This is a film premiere screening.
What happens when a beaver returns to a waterway? When those webbed feet and scaly tails start engineering the land? What happens to a watershed when its relative returns? What if the presence of a beaver were not a conflict, but an opportunity? A medicine of possibility for all living creatures?
The North American beaver, Castor canadensis, has existed on Turtle Island for over 6 million years. This means that beavers have lived on this continent for 5.5 million years longer than humans, and explains why beavers appear so frequently in indigenous creation stories. In the Haudenosaunee creation story, beaver was the first animal to attempt to bring soil to the back of a great turtle to create solid ground. Beaver's key role as an ecosystem engineer in this and many other indigenous stories demonstrates both the significance of beaver to the land and the depth of ecological knowledge nurtured by native cultures. Not only are beavers iconic stewards of Turtle Island, but they were once abundant in number. 200 million beavers are estimated to have shaped the land we humans now call home, with a colony of beavers defining nearly every headwater in North America. Beavers are the largest rodent on Turtle Island. Most weigh between 40 and 70 pounds and grow to 4 feet long. With iron-coated incisors and powerful jaws, beavers take down trees without a single tool. Their rubber-like tails help them balance and swim, and their waterproof fur allows them to withstand freezing temperatures. Thanks to their amazing instinct and physiology, beavers are recognized by arborists as world-class tree fallers. They can take down heavily leaning trees up to 3 feet wide in the direction of their choice, a feat that most humans require heavy machinery to accomplish. Beavers put their master skills and strength to work by creating dams, canals, ponds, and other structures that benefit both their own colonies and the ecosystems around them. Together, these structures make up a beaver complex. Each structure in a complex is unique and serves a specialized purpose, offering benefits not only for the beaver colony, but for the entire wetland ecosystem. These incredible constructions can span hundreds of meters and can take several generations to build. Beaver dams filter water, capturing fertilizer and sediment, and creating nutrient-dense environments that help aquatic plants grow. These dams result in beaver ponds, deep, cool pools of water formed by the slowing of upstream flows. Colder water from beaver ponds can slowly recharge groundwater reserves and cools the water downstream, supporting temperature-sensitive fish and amphibians. On land, beaver trails connect the many aquatic structures built throughout the riparian zone and forest. These trails are used by all kinds of animals.
Beaver scent mounds are used not only by beaver to delineate their territorial boundaries, but also by other species to communicate their presence on the land. By changing the distribution of water, nutrients, and landforms in their ecosystem, beavers create havens for biodiversity to thrive. Indigenous people have lived in reciprocal relationship with beavers since time immemorial. Historically, thick, waterproof beaver pelts were transformed into warm mittens and hats. Tender, nutritious beaver meat provided protein. The people of Turtle Island harvested and processed beaver in a sustainable way, following diverse, culturally specific customs that offered gratitude for beavers and the gifts they provided. Through indigenous stewardship and land-based resources, it is estimated that 200 million beavers once inhabited the lower 48 prior to European colonization. Historically and today, beavers are accepted by many native people as neighbors and relatives. In the last 300 years, the relationship between humans and beavers has changed drastically. The colonization of Turtle Island was marked by a surge of exploitative fur trapping that profoundly disrupted the spiritual relationship between indigenous people and beaver. This hyper-commodification upset this delicate, millennial-old balances that native people so perceptively cultivated on the land, threatening beaver to near extinction. While indigenous people resisted commodification, dire and often violent pressures to assimilate to the culture and economies of settlers often strained and severed many relationships with beaver, resulting in a drastic decline in population. Without beavers' ingenuity actively cultivating wetlands and managing forests, landscapes transformed. As dams went unmaintained, entire watersheds became drier. Ponds subsequently disappeared, taking with them the plant and animal diversity that called them home. Wetland ecosystems suffered greatly. Water is life, and without beaver to steward this sacred element, life became more scarce. Today, after generations without beavers, the tide is turning. An awakening to the need for indigenous perspectives in conservation is creating space for century-old teachings to inform our collective path forward. Recovery efforts, many indigenous-led, have already revived the beaver population by an estimated 15 million. This return is accompanied by countless benefits for both people and the planet. Living alongside beaver is an opportunity to learn, not only about the land and water, but about the architecture, engineering, and industry. As we face a future of increasing droughts, floods, and environmental extremes, beaver can teach us more resilient ways of living on the land. They can help us regenerate the rivers, streams, ponds, and other precious ecosystems on which we all depend. Whether we recognize beavers as pests or providers is all a matter of perception. These hardworking neighbors of ours can offer countless benefits to our communities if we choose to treat them with respect. What happens when we return a relative to a waterway? Do we just save one species, or do we begin to build a better world for us all?